Hi, so today I'm going to start with the definition of learning. Learning happens when experience, including practice, produce a stable change in someone's knowledge or behavior. The change may be intentional or not, but to qualify as learning, the change must occur because of experience as the individual interacts with his or her environment. Change, simply due to maturation such as growing taller or getting bald, are not instances of learning. Similarly, temporary change due to illness, fatigue, or short-lived physical deprivations are not part of learning, although of course people do learn how to cope with such problems. Next, on your left, there will be three general theory of learning with each different focus. Number one, behavior theories. The behavior theories is known as a learning stress observable change in behavior, skills, and habit. Next, connective theory. Connective theory, known as a learning underscore such internal mental activity as thinking, remembering, creating, and problem solving. Last, constructivist theory, known as learning, are interested in how individuals make meaning of event and activity. Hence, learning is seen as the construction of knowledge. Okay, now I'm going to continue with the next reinforcement. In reinforcement, there are two types, which is positive and negative reinforcement. I will start with the positive first. Positive reinforcement is known as a occur when behavior produces a new stimulus or motivating force. Next, when a consequence strengthens a behavior by providing the addition of a stimulus, positive reinforcement have occurred. Example, by praise and giving compliment to the students, by giving them a token, stickers, and reward to students. That is one of example of positive reinforcement. Next, negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is occur when the consequences that reinforce or threaten behavior is obtained by eliminating, subtracting a stimulus. When a particular action leads to stopping or avoiding a negative situation, that behavior is likely to be repeated because the individual has learned how to avoid something negative or uncomfortable. The negative is negative reinforcement does not necessarily mean that the behavior being reinforced is bad, but rather negative implies something is being subtracted from the situation that that reinforced behave. Example, as problematic students. Okay, instead of giving a harsh punishment to them, so we can give example like we will send them to a summer camp to attend so that they can able to learn and adapt on how to change the behavior and learn on how to be disciplined. That is one of example of negative reinforcement. Next, punishment. The first type of punishment is direct punishment. Direct punishment because it occurs when the participants of the are assigning as a removal punishment. Removal punishment because stimulus is removed from the for example, when parents or teachers remove students' privilege, they are engaging in removing punishment. They are removing something that is desired. Thus, direct punishment adds something to clean or stop behavior, and removal punishment subtract or delete something to decrease or weaken behavior. Next, antecedent. Antecedents, there are two types, cueing and prompting. Start with the cueing. Cueing is providing an antecedent stimulus just prior to a particular behavior. It is especially useful in preparing for a behavior that must occur at a specific time but is easily forgotten. Cueing furnishes information about which behavior will be rewarded or punished in a particular situation. For example, a police force sitting under an overpass or simply along the highway provide an instantaneous cue about consequences of speeding. Next, prompting. Prompting is providing an additional cue following the first cue. Sometimes people need extra help in responding appropriate to a cue. Example of prompting is providing students with a checklist or to-do list when they work in pairs as part of peer tutoring. As students learn the procedure, the checklist gradually is withdrawn. When the students have learned the procedure, no written or oral prompts are necessary. Thus, accidents, antecedents are the events preceding behavior, while cueing is providing an antecedent stimulus just prior to a particular behavior. Teaching application of the behavioral approach. Number one, the good behavior game. Basically, the good behavior game is more to teamwork, like a classroom center. So, teachers and students discuss what will make the classroom a better place to learn and identify behavior that interfere with learning. Like example, based on the discussion, class rules are developed and the class is divided into two or more teams. Each time a student breaks a rule, that student's team is given a mark. So the team with the fewest mark at the end of the period receive a special reward or privilege. For example, a longer recess, first to go lunch, and all that. Next, positive behavior support based on functional behavior assessment. Receive attention from other teacher, parent, and peer. Escape from some unpleasant situation, academic or social demand. Get a desired item or activity. Meet a sensory need such as stimulation from rocking or flapping arms for some children with autism. Next, positive behavior support based on a functional behavior assessment. This is known as a process of understanding the problem behavior is known as a functional behavior FBA, a collection of method or procedure used to obtain information about antecedents behavior and consequences to determine the reason or functioning of the behavior. For example, as soon as the reason for the behavior is known, teacher can devise way of supporting positive behavior that will serve the same why function. For example, we once worked with a middle school principal who was concerned about a boy who was having trouble in a number of subjects, especially math. The students disturbed the math class at least twice a week and end up in the principal office. When he arrived, the boy got the principal's undivided attention. After a scolding, they talked about sport because the principal liked the student and was concerned that because the boy's father had died several years ago, he had no male role model. It is easy to spot the function of the classroom disruption. They always lead to escape from math class, negative reinforcement, and one time with the principal, positive reinforcement after a little bit of demanding. Hence, together with the principal and the teacher, we develop way to support the student's positive behavior in maths by getting him some extra tutoring and by giving him time with the principal when he complete maths problem instead of when he act up in the class. Next, Positive behavior support. Students with disability and those at risk for special education placement. Positive behavior support are intervention designed to replace problem behavior with new action that serve the same purpose for the students. Positive behavior support based on functional behavior assessment can help students with disabilities succeed in inclusion classroom. Learning objective. Instructional objective is clear and unambiguous description of the teacher's education aims for students. There are three parts. The first one is intended students' behavior, the condition under which the behavior will occur, and the criteria for acceptable performance of the behavior. Last but not least is the direct instruction, which is direct the direct instruction procedure described in this section is fit a specific set of circumstances because they have involved from a common strand of inquiry. So basic skill, clear structure knowledge, and essential skills such as science, fact, mathematics, computations, reading vocabularies, and grammar rules. A little bit short of the notes is that skill involve tasks that can be taught step by step and tested by standard tests.
Cognitivism is a theoretical framework for understanding the mind that gained credence in 1950s. The movement was developed as reaction to behaviorism. Cognitivists objected behaviorists because behaviorists thought learning was simply a reaction to a stimulus and ignored the importance of thinking. Major contributors to the development of cognitive theory are Noam Chomsky, Brunner, Goodnow, and Austin, Ulrich Neisser, David Ausubel, Robert Gagne, the Gestalt psychologists of Germany, and Benjamin Bloom. Let's look at the history of cognitivism. Tolman is the only behaviorist who found the stimulus response theory unacceptable because reinforcement was not necessary for learning to occur. Jean Piaget was the first psychologist to make a systematic study of cognitive development. Piaget explored changes in internal cognitive structure. His theory of cognitive development suggests that children move through four different stages of mental development. His theory focuses not only on the understanding how children acquire knowledge, but also on understanding the nature of intelligence. Lev Vygotsky was a Russian psychologist who argued that culture has a major impact on a child's cognitive development. Piaget believed development stemmed directly from the child, and although Vygotsky acknowledged intrinsic development, he argued that it is the language, writing, and concept arising from the culture that elicit the highest level of cognitive thinking. He believed that the social interaction with adult and more learned peers can facilitate a child's potential for learning. Without this interpersonal instruction, he believed children's mind would not advance very far as their knowledge would be based only on their own discoveries. Jerome Bruner was very influenced by Piaget's and Vygotsky's work. He was responsible for introducing Vygotsky's work in the non-Soviet world. Cognitive perspective on learning. Cognitive theories focus on thinking, learning, conceptualization, and problem solving. Learning is an active mental process. We plan our responses using systems to help us remember and organize materials. Existing knowledge guides to new learning, the scaffold that will support the construction of all the future learning. And a good basis of knowledge can be more important than learning the good strategies. and understanding and also remembering. Information processing model. Early views had the analog between mind and computer. Information are stored in three storage systems, which is sensory memory, working memory, and also long-term memory. Sensory memory, holding system that maintains stimuli so that perceptual analysis can occur. Working memory is short-term memory and it lasted for 20 seconds. For long-term memories, the store over huge amounts of info for long period of time and it can be coded verbally or visually or both. Sensory memory is the initial system that briefly holds stimuli we perceive through our senses. It can be sensory buffer, which is images, and also echoic memory, which is sound. Working memory can be defined where new information is held briefly. It is a resemble of screen of computers and the content is activated information in the moment of consciousness. The working memories is basically one for language-based information and another one is for nonverbal, spatial, and also visual information. The duration of working memory is short, which is 5 to 20 seconds. We may use or lose it. Whenever working memory is not activated, it fades. So, in order to maintain info in working memories, we need to rehearsal or do some chunking. Chunking means regroup or chunk individual bits of information into meaningful units. For long-term memories, hold information that we move from working memories for indefinite storage. It is unlimited, but it is not always easy to access if much is stored over a long time. It would be three types of long-term memory, which is episodic regarding memories, personal memories, procedural is how you do things, and also semantic referring to memories for meanings, generally concept or principle. There are two ways of storing semantic memories is through image or abstract structure. We are more likely to remember new material if we integrate it with some information which is already stored in a long-term memory. So there are three ways to facilitate this kind of integration, which is celebration, is to add meaning to the new info by connecting it to existing knowledge. And we might also organize structuring information so that it helps you to remember general ideas and specific example. We may also integrate it through context where we learn physical and emotional aspect of context along with the information that we process within the context, meaning replicating context helps to recall the information. Overall, the more completely information is processed, When we first learn it, it is the better of our chances of remembering it. Metacognition is individual awareness of his or her own cognitive processes and how they work. So, metacognitive understanding is to regulate the learning of planning, monitoring, and also evaluation. So, these skills begins to develop at the age of 5 to 7, and I can improve throughout the school.
Teaching applications of the cognitive approach. There are some guiding principles on cognitive approach. If you can refer to your textbook on page 70, there are 13 guiding principles, but in my slides, I only choose 5. So the rest of the principles you can read on your own. The first one is make sure that you have the students' attention in your classroom before you start teaching a lesson. Second, help students focus on the most important information, because if they don't focus, they won't remember the important information. Then, help students make connection between new information and what they already know. For this case, maybe the teachers can provide some examples or references for students to connect the informations. Next is provide review and repetition of information. This can help the brain to remember the information easily because we keep repeating about the information to our students. The last one is focus on meaning, not memorization. Then we move to the important application of cognitive theories. The most important application of cognitive theories are teaching students how to learn and remember by using learning tactics and strategies. The learning strategies can be cognitive, metacognitive, and behavioral. Learning strategies is the kind of knowing how to do something. For example, concept mapping, graphing, summarizing, and outlining are cognitive learning strategies. For metacognitive, is regarding monitoring comprehension. For example, do you understand about this presentation? It's more about your own ability to use this knowledge to manage your own cognitive process. For behavioral, it's based on your behavior, how you engage with your work. For example, let's say if you manage to finish your work within a period of time, you can set an alarm clock to ensure that you will finish your work within the time that has been set. There are 4 common techniques of cognitive approach. First one is underlining or highlighting. When you read on articles or textbooks, there must be some of the key phrases that you underline or highlight. These strategies commonly used among graduate students. According to Snowman, there is a limit on how much students can underline. For example, only one sentence per paragraph. When you only select a few words to highlight, you can actively transform the information into your own words. Next is taking notes. Taking notes has at least 2 important functions. First, note-taking focuses attention and helps encode information. When you record the key ideas in your own words, it has a better chance of making it into long-term memory. Second, notes provide a permanent record that permits students to return and review. According to Kira, students who use their notes to study tend to perform better on tests. Next is visual tools. Visual graphics such as concept maps, diagrams, or chart is more effective than simply outlining the text. According to Armbruster and Anderson, specific techniques for diagramming relationship among ideas presented in a text and found that they improve the students' learning. The other useful techniques are Venn diagrams and tree diagrams. Venn diagrams show how ideas or concepts overlap, while tree diagrams demonstrate how ideas branch from each other. For example, when you go to McDonald's, you want to buy a burger, then you can choose one side serve consists of fries and salad. And for drinks, you can choose cola or juice. Next is mnemonic. Mnemonics are systemic procedures for improving memory. A mnemonic helps us to remember certain facts or large amount information. For example, because. Because stands for big elephant can always upset small elephant. And the last one is acronym. Acronym is a form of abbreviation that is a word formed from the first letter of each word or a phrase. For example, UNESCO. UNESCO stands for United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. We move to the next subtopic, which is a constructivist approach to learning. Constructivism is a broad term used by philosophers, curriculum specialists, psychologists, and educators. It describes perspective grounded in the research of Piaget, Vygotsky, Gestalt psychologists, and as well as the philosophy of John Dewey. Most of the constructivists agree on two central ideas. The first one is learners are active in constructing their own knowledge. The second one is social interaction are important in this knowledge construction process. Constructivist approach in science and mathematics educations, educational psychology, anthropology, and computer-based education all embrace these two ideas. There are three types of constructivism consist of psychological constructivism, social constructivism, and radical constructivism. The constructivist of psychological constructivism is Piaget, which known as first wave constructivism. Psychological constructivists are interested in individual knowledge, belief, self-concept, or identity. They focus on the inner psychological life of people and how individuals build up their cognitive and emotional structures and strategies. For example, Piaget proposed a sequence of cognitive stages that all humans pass through. Thinking at each stage builds on and incorporates previous stages as it becomes more organized and adaptive and less tied to concrete events. Piaget described how individuals develop schemes. Schemes are organized systems of action or thought that allow us mentally represent or think about the objects and events in our world. There are two processes are applied to scheme. The first one is assimilation and the second one is accommodation. Assimilation involves trying to understand something new by applying existing schemes, while accommodation occurs when a person must change the existing ways of thinking to respond to a new situation. Piaget's psychological constructivist perspective was less concerned with correct representation and more interested in meaning as constructed by the individual. Its special concern was with logic and the construction of universal knowledge that cannot be learned directly from the environment. Piaget saw the social environment as an important factor in development but did not believe that social interaction was the main mechanism for changing thinking. Then, we move to Vygotsky's social constructivism. Vygotsky believed that knowledge is socially constructed, which means knowledge is built upon what participants contribute and construct together. Social interaction, cultural tools, and activity shape individual development and learning. Vygotsky believed that cultural tools play very important roles in cognitive development. This symbol system is passed from adult to child through formal and informal interaction and teachings. Adults teach these tools to children during day-to-day activities and the children internalize them. The last one is radical constructivism. This approach encourages collaboration to understand diverse viewpoints and often challenges traditional bodies of knowledge. It finds no basis for evaluating or interpreting any belief as any better or any worse than any other. A difficulty with this position is that when pushed to the extreme of relativism, all knowledge and belief are equal because all are constructed. This way of thinking offers problems for educators.
Assalamualaikum and hello to Dr. Lele and everyone. I am Nurul Zarina and I will continue our last part of presentation, which is constructivist theory. So I will continue what Farhana has been elaborated just now. So we move on to how is knowledge constructed. So how is knowledge constructed? Social constructivist theory states that it is both external and internal factors, meaning to say that knowledge is constructed based on social interactions and experience. It is also said that every function in the child's cultural development occurs twice, first on the social level and later on the individual level. First between people, interpsychological, and then inside the child, intrapsychological. Okay, I will explain more about this by giving you the examples. Okay, so we can see here, okay, the example. Okay, Schaeffer 1996 gives the example of a young girl who is given her first jigsaw. Alone, she performs poorly in attempting to solve the puzzle, which is here she doesn't have any knowledge. She doesn't have any prior knowledge or anything. So she performs poorly in attempting to solve the puzzle. And then the father sits with her and describes or demonstrates some basic strategies and provides a couple of pieces for the child to put together herself and offers encouragement when she does so. Now, this is when the external factors involved, which is the social level. Okay, it is between the people, interpsychological, between the father and the child. Here, the father transfer or give the child some knowledge and um, teaching the child on how to solve the puzzle, the jigsaw. So here is the level where interpsychological is occur. And then, as the child becomes more competent, the father allows the child to work more independently. Here is when the intra-psychological fact part, which is the internal factors, is used here. The child used her prior knowledge of what his father been taught her before. So she used the knowledge to solve the jigsaw by herself. So here, the daughter seeks to understand the action or instruction provided by his father, then she internalizes the information, using it to guide or regulate her own performance. So here, it is the child seeks to understand the action or instruction provided by the tutor or her father, then she internalizes the information, using it to guide or regulate their own performance. So we move on to teaching applications of constructivist approaches. So here I will give you three examples. Okay, the first one is problem-based learning. Okay, problem-based learning is a student-centered approach in which students learn about a subject by working in groups to solve an open-ended problem. So, this problem is what drives the motivation and the learning. So, the problem-based learning is the one of the most popular methods of facilitating deep learning. It starts with a problem. So, and students are presented with an open-ended problem, which student must search through a variety of resources, which is called trigger material, and to help them understand the problem from all angles. Okay, I will explain more. I will give you the example. The example of the problem-based learning activity is bridge building. So, students will begin by studying the engineering of bridge building by comparing the construction of famous bridges such as the Penang bridges or uh, and all other bridges in Malaysia. Then you give them a problem. They have to work in teams to construct bridges out of popsicle sticks. But the challenge here is they have to get the bridge to hold 5 pounds. So, when you give them the problem, they will work with their team and use the prior knowledge, which is uh, they already study the engineering of bridge building. They will build bridges out of obstacle sticks, but the bridges have to hold 5 pounds. So this is where the learning process is of. So we move on to the second example, which is cognitive apprenticeships. So cognitive apprenticeships is a cognitive social learning. It focuses on learning through guided experience on cognitive and metacognitive skills and processes. So what is cognitive apprenticeship? So cognitive apprenticeship is a paradigm shift in learning. This model of instructional delivery will be used to redefine learning to make it visible to learners. According to Colin Brown, 1989, cognitive apprenticeship is a method of teaching and primarily at teaching the processes that experts use to handle complex tasks. The focus of this learning through guided experience is on cognitive and metacognitive skills rather than on the physical skills and processes of traditional apprenticeships. Applying apprenticeship methods to largely cognitive skills requires the externalization of processes that are usually carried out internally. Observing the processes by which an expert listener or reader thinks and practices these skills can teach students to learn on their own more easily. In this learning environment, learners are presented with a real-world context embedded with authentic tasks that emphasize social interaction and situated learning. So move on to the last but not least of the example, which is cooperative learning. So cooperative learning is the process of breaking a classroom of students into small groups so they can discover a new concept together and help each other learn. So the idea of cooperative learning has been around for decades, but it never got to the same prominence as blended learning or differentiated instruction. For example of cooperative learning is scripted cooperation. So correct me doctor if I'm wrong. Okay. So what we do now is what we done now is a cooperative learning. Okay, doctor instructed us to divide us into the small group, 3 until 5 person in the group. For example, my group. Okay. So my task is about finding um, about the constructivist approaches, while my other team member will find about the Piaget theory, the behaviorism theory. So after we finish our task, after we uh, finish about what we have to do, So, uh, we again discuss together what we already found and help each other learn. So, we will share what we find to our group member and they will share to me what they find so that the learning process is occur. So there is a special interaction between me and my group member. So this is what cooperative learning means. Okay, now we move on to the learning perspective of social constructivists by Vygotsky. So what is the perspective of social constructivists on knowledge? So I already explained to you about how knowledge is constructed based on social constructivist theory. It is both external and internal factors, right? So external world models the mind. Knowledge is internalization of social activity. For example, the example I give you just now, which is the father gives the daughter the jigsaw puzzle. At the first, the daughter didn't know how to solve the problem of the jigsaw. But then the father sits beside her, guides her, teach her on how to solve the problem. And by time being, the daughter already get it, and she can solve the jigsaw problem by herself without her father guide. Okay. So the next one is learning. The perspective of social constructivism on learning. This is it says that collaborative construction of social defined knowledge and value. So it is occurred through socially constructed opportunity. This is the learning can be occurred by socially, by we socialize to others, and it gives us the opportunity to construct the knowledge. Okay. The next one is the teaching. So the perspective of social constructivist of teaching is the teacher and the students for constructing knowledge. It means that the uh, teacher and the student is both play the same important role in social interaction and how they construct co-constructing new knowledge. So they both have the main important the important role to have this socially and co-constructing knowledge. Okay, next one is the perspective of social constructivist on role. So, role of teacher is as a facilitator, a guide, and help co-construct knowledge. While the role of classmate, which is a part of process knowledge construction. For example, us. All of us have the role, which is your part. You have a part of process knowledge construction. Next is student. Us. Another us. Okay. The student, as student, you have to active social participant. You have to actively socially and actively participate in everything that involves learning and learning process. So the next one is an example of business approaches, which I already did now before this slide. The three examples is PBL, problem-based learning, cooperative learning, and cognitive apprenticeship. Okay, now we move on to the last part of my presentation. This is the conclusion of the basic theory. There are three major parts, major themes. The first one is social interaction plays a fundamental role in the process of cognitive development. Many people feel that young children are always full of curiosity and always actively involved in their own learning. and the discovery and development of new understanding. So it is much important learning by the child occurs through social interaction with a skillful tutor. So it is placed more emphasis on social contribution to the process of development. Okay, next one, the second major thing is the more knowledgeable other. So the more knowledgeable other refers to someone who has a better understanding or a higher ability level than the learner with respect to a particular task, process, or concept. Many times, a child's peer or adult's children may be the individuals with more knowledgeable person. The key to more knowledgeable others is that they must more knowledge about the topic being learned than the learner does. Okay? So that they have the interaction there. Because the teacher or the more knowledgeable person have have to be the facilitator to guide the learner. Okay, the last one is the third major thing is the zone of optimal development, the ZPD. Okay, what is ZPD? Okay, I will show you the picture here. So, it is zone of optimal development is it is skills to be difficult for a child to master on his or her own, but then can be done with guidance and encouragement from a knowledgeable person. Okay, so this is an important concept that relates to the difference between what a child can achieve independently and what a child can achieve with guidance and encouragement from a skilled partner. So, the concept of more knowledgeable other is integrally related to the second important principle of advocacy work, the zone of personal development. Because here, when the child is difficult to master what the task or she cannot do the task, and it is where the MKO or the more knowledgeable person is play the important role because he or her has to guide and encouragement the student or the children on how to master on his or her own. What that is meaning by zone of personal development. So, if you have any question, you can just ask me. Um, that's all for me. Thank you very much.